you doing? Are you going to plug your computer into the projector?
It's already, isn't it? No,
No.
it's not yet. Okay, fine. Okay. Welcome. Yeah, maybe let's wait 10 seconds. Okay, let's get started. So, just to introduce myself, my name is David Maier. I'm working as a principal solutions engineer for Couchbase in Germany. So, or in case that I should have a too strange accent, please apologize. Yeah. Hope you understand me anyway. Okay, so I'm really happy to introduce Bala from Elastic. Bala will give you some introduction and insights to Elasticsearch and the whole product portfolio. And then afterwards, I will perform a demo how Elasticsearch and Couchbase can be used together. So it's yours.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Couchbase, for inviting us here. And thank you all for attending the session. I know I think we're pretty close to the end of the conference, so thanks for hanging in here and listening to this talk. So before I get started, just a quick show of hands. How many of you know about Elasticsearch, are using Elasticsearch along with Couchbase? Okay. Using the connector, the Elasticsearch Couchbase connector? Okay. So yeah, so the talk is really centered around like why these two technologies sort of should coexist, the synergies between these two technologies, and how both the companies are working together to make it easier for you folks to use both of these systems and technologies as part of your applications. So my name is Bala Venkatrao. I'm part of the product management team at Elastic. I work on a broad array of things at Elastic, including some of the integrations with NoSQL vendors like Couchbase. So I'm going to be at a fairly high level kind of talk about Elasticsearch, the value proposition of Elasticsearch, and what we do as a company, Elastic. So I'm going to spend some time on that, and then really kind of like compare and contrast like Elasticsearch and Couchbase and the need for integration and the connectivity between these two technologies. And then David is going to come in and really get into the guts of it. Right? He's going to talk about the connector. He's going to talk about like how the connector works and some of the elements of the Couchbase technology which is rolled in as part of the connector. So this is something which should be very familiar to most of you if you're attending the conference. But if you look at the nature of the data, it's changed. I think we've kind of in this era where it's just not structured data, it's unstructured data, all sorts of data. You have tweets, you have location-specific information, you have user activities, machine data. So the key is how do you sort of make sense of all of this unstructured data? And businesses are immensely finding value in all of this data. So that's what we talk about big data, where you can take all sorts of these unstructured, semi-structured data and make sense out of it to have some business impact. So as you're kind of looking through this equation, the fundamental question, at least we at Elastic looked at it like probably like 6-7 years back and said there is a need to create a scalable search and analytics platform, right? Because we approach the problem of looking at all of the data and making sense of it first from a search perspective, but then as you're searching through the data, you want to also get the analytics and insights from the data. So Elasticsearch has been built from that sort of thinking. Like how do you sort of like start search and then you sort of get into analytics and insights from all of that information. And when you're trying to build a new distributed sort of computing infrastructure or a framework, there are various elements you need to sort of think through, right? And it kind of equally applies to what Couchbase has done and some of the other NoSQL technologies. But from an Elasticsearch or an Elastic perspective, these were some of the core tenets we looked at, right? What is horizontal scale? What does scale mean by? How do you sort of scale your infrastructure on commodity servers? How do you access information in real time, right? So people kind of talk about big data, but then they say, yeah, you can sort of get insights from all of the data, except it's going to take hours, right? How do you sort of do it in a real-time sort of fashion? And I'm sort of a big believer in closed-loop analytics, and I'm going to talk about some of the examples which are powered by the Elasticsearch platform in enabling customers, help them do this closed-loop real-time analytics. Flexibility. You want to be able to store all sorts of data, structured, unstructured, and be able to understand the insights from that data. You want to be able to do fast search, right? Have the data come in, you want to index it, search through all of the data, but also be able to do query and aggregation and analytics on all of the data in near real-time speed, basically. So those are all the elements when you're kind of thinking about how you want to build a distributed search and analytics engine. And we kind of took all of those elements and we built Elasticsearch, right? So Elasticsearch is built on those fundamental pillars of addressing those requirements. It's distributed, built to scale, and is resilient. It's developer friendly. It's got a very simple API for developers to get started. It's native JSON, right? So data comes in, you can just write it in JSON, and if you're using Logstash, you know the power of ingesting data in all sorts of forms and shape, and then writing it in JSON format in Elasticsearch. And then once you have the data in Elasticsearch, you can enable the real-time search and analysis on that data. And it's instantaneous. As new data comes in, it gets indexed, and you can search it really, really quickly. And I think many of you in this audience have already sort of witnessed the power of what Elasticsearch can do. So building on the foundation of Elasticsearch, Elastic as a company was born, right? The idea was, how do we help enterprises leverage the power of Elasticsearch? And we kind of took a step back and said, yeah, Elasticsearch is the core platform which will help you do search and analytics, but you need more, right? You need a seamless way for you to ingest data from various sources, and we sort of took the Logstash project, which is again a very popular open source project, and made that part of the platform. We also said there is a need to be able to visualize the data, to be able to understand the data and like see all the insights, and that's where like we took the Kibana open source project and rolled it as part of the platform, and that became the genesis of the ELK platform, right? So you commonly hear the term ELK, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And that's what we sort of bring to enterprises, the power of the platform, right? So at the end of the day, Elastic as a company is bringing that platform which kind of can power a whole range of use cases, right from search, where you can just index the data and search through it. And we have numerous customers. If you look at customers like Stack Overflow or examples like Stack Overflow and GitHub, they're basically using the power of Elasticsearch. If you look at GitHub, all the code is being indexed in Elasticsearch. So when you're searching through a piece of code, it's hitting Elasticsearch instances in the backend. You want to kind of do analytics, right? And this is what I kind of talked about. How do you power this notion of closed loop, real-time interactive analytics? And we have various examples of this. Most notably, we have OPower recently, which is kind of doing some really interesting work around energy analytics, where they're getting information from all these various homes and they're doing some comparison. All of that is powered using the power of analytics in the ELK platform. There's also companies like Guardium, where you're kind of interacting with the website, and they want to really understand how users are interacting with the platform and get that information in real time so they can like provide the right recommendation in terms of new content which they can suggest to the users. And then we also, a lot of customers are using the power of ELK platform to do log analytics, right? So customers like Bloomberg were pretty much using the entire ELK stack to consume all sorts of different logs through Logstash, ingest that in Elasticsearch, and then visualize that using Kibana. So that's the core open source ELK platform, which you can download, get started, try it out, and build your applications. But as you're starting to productize it, that's where you sort of like partner with a company like Elastic, where we work with you and we kind of help you provide like value-added tools to help you run these applications in production. And we've kind of built a whole range of proprietary plugins to help you, enable you to succeed in your endeavors. So we have like a tool called Marble, which helps you do the monitoring and the management for Elasticsearch clusters. Most recently, we also announced a plugin called Shield to help you do security for your Elasticsearch clusters. How do you sort of like secure it at the index level, which users get access to what index level, and also at the cluster level, and like so on and so forth. Just a few weeks back, we announced a new plugin called Watcher to enable alerting, right? So once you're writing all of these queries, if the queries reach a certain threshold, how do you sort of get alerts and notification based on that? If you're using your ELK cluster for log analytics, and if you start seeing certain error messages in the logs, you want to be able to create alerts on that and take some actions based on that. So these are some of the value-added sort of plugins which Elastic as a company has built, and there are more, right? We're kind of working on like more interesting sort of plugins, but the idea is we want to make it easier for users and enterprises to get started with the platform and not get caught up in the operational aspect of it, right? Like we will make it easier from the operations perspective to get the ELK stack up and running, basically. We also recently, a few months back at ElasticCon, back in March, we acquired a company called Found, and the Found is an interesting company which was taking Elasticsearch and offering that as a service. So it's a turnkey service, so for many of you who just want to get started with Elasticsearch, you can just go to found.no, specify your size of the cluster, and input your credit card, and your cluster is available, right? It's as easy as that. And we have some interesting vision in terms of what we want to do with the technology which we have acquired as part of the Found acquisition. So you'll hear from us in the next few months in terms of what we're doing around the Found products and the Found technology. So that's how we approach the market, right? We have the core platform, and we want developers to build interesting applications, and then we have a set of commercial products and plugins which we will help you to make you succeed in running your ELK sort of platform within your organization. So coming back to the need for integration, right? So Elasticsearch as a technology, as a platform is really, really good at a few things, right? So if you really want to kind of think about your application from a search perspective and analytics perspective, you want a distributed infrastructure with scales, you want schema-less, you want to kind of have all sorts of information feed into Elasticsearch, you want geo support. Elasticsearch really does a great job, right? And you want to leverage that along with the other products I kind of talked about, Logstash and Kibana. So Elasticsearch has got the breadth of features and functionality built, or the ELK stack has got the features and functionality built in it. But at the same time, there's immense value and synergies to kind of work with technologies like Couchbase, right? And there are numerous use cases where Couchbase is the right sort of backend for a certain application. So you want to be able to store your data in Couchbase, but at the same time, you want to be able to index the data in Elasticsearch so you can search through the data. And we've seen lots of examples where customers have done this very effectively, where they have either instrumented their application to write to both Elasticsearch and Couchbase, or they're using the connector, which David will sort of get into the details, as a way to ship the data or move the data from Couchbase to Elasticsearch periodically, so data gets kind of indexed and available for search through the Elasticsearch offering. So that's where the connector comes in, and the rest of the talk is going to be getting into the details of what the connector is and what the Couchbase team has built and how exactly it works, basically. So just one more point before I hand it over to David is we are continuing to work very closely with the Couchbase team, and it's been a very good partnership. We sort of work with them very closely, and there are a lot of features in the roadmap we're thinking of, like adding things like adding support for security, adding support for monitoring. So we have a rich roadmap as part of the Elasticsearch. At the same time, Couchbase has got some interesting roadmaps. So we want to be able to converge, partner, and make sure we keep making this connector as performant as possible to be able to talk between Elasticsearch clusters and Couchbase clusters. So with that, David, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, my part of the talk is a little bit development focused. So just a few questions here. Who of you is a developer? Yeah. Who is not? Okay, yeah. Hope it's not too boring, but yeah. Let's start a little bit about the internals, and Bala already explained a little bit what the difference between Elasticsearch and Couchbase is. I mean, all of you know Couchbase. You know that we are talking at Couchbase about hundreds of thousands of operations per second, highly operative database system in this case, right, by being highly scalable, easy scalable. But let's talk a little bit about the difference between indexes, right? So indexes. So Couchbase is basically used for key value access if you access via the key value store, right? So you have a key, and based on this key, you're getting the value, right? So in the next step, what you can do with Couchbase is you can build secondary indexes. So via views, if you heard the talk before, then you know what views are. Maybe you still do or already do. Which means you can build secondary indexes with Couchbase. Something like, okay, I'm searching for a person who's named Tim, and I'm referencing back to the document with the key, number 2 in this case. An inverted index is something which is Elasticsearch doing, or Lucene behind the scenes is doing. You're basically indexing on terms, right? In this case, we have the sentence, Tim is sitting next to Bob, and another sentence which is, Tim is sitting next to Jim, right? So, and based on this tokenizing, you're referencing then back to the original documents. And exactly this is the idea behind Elasticsearch here. The idea is that you full text index your data in order to reference back to Couchbase, right? Okay, so what it is all about, right? So the talk today is not just about Elasticsearch and our plugin, but also about real-time business intelligence by using Kibana, right? So what is really cool is that you can use Couchbase as your data sink, right? As mentioned before, hundreds of thousands of operations per second. And then behind the scenes, it is asynchronously replicated over to Elasticsearch. It's full text indexed there. And then you can use, I would say, a lightweighted business intelligence or tool or framework like Kibana in order to perform analysis, right? So, and I personally think this is really awesome because it's really easy. It really happens in real time. It's really easy to define your reports. Yeah, some years ago, if you worked with business intelligence tools, you had ETL processes, get data out of some relational database systems, or transform it into something which is fitting into your data warehouse, define your reports, execute your report once a day in order to provide it to somebody, right? This is really working in real time because all this transformation is happening implicitly by using, in our case, the Elasticsearch mapping, right? So you're transferring data over, you're indexing it there, you decide how you would like to index it, you map it to your Elasticsearch entries, and finally, you can then build reports based on Kibana. Okay, I would like to start this a little bit with a demo. The demo is available here, so if you are interested how it works, you can check it out. Otherwise, I will explain how it works. It's just loading some data to Elasticsearch. So we expect that there is an empty bucket, an empty Couchbase bucket, and on the other side we have just an Elasticsearch index. Then I will use my Twitter account to load some data to Elasticsearch, and we will see a Kibana dashboard, which is doing very simple analysis based on my Twitter tweets, right? And then finally, we will change something by just adding a new Twitter tweet, right? And then we will look that the report changed immediately, right? So let's do this. I hope that the demo gods are with me, so looks fine. Okay, so let's start by looking at this Twitter bucket, right? So basically what we have here is a Twitter bucket in Couchbase, which is looking like this, right? So if you know Couchbase's admin UI, then you know how it's looking like. It's looking a little bit strange here because actually the projector is not showing some gray values, but the bucket is empty, as you can see here, right? So the idea is that this bucket is empty. And in the same step, we can go to our index, and the index is as well empty. It only has some checkpoint documents inside it. I will explain what it means, right? Because what we did is actually we created an XDCR link between our Couchbase cluster and our Elasticsearch cluster in this case. And XDCR is cross-data center replication. It is a feature of Couchbase. And Couchbase in this case isn't even aware of, so this Couchbase server cluster isn't even aware of that on the other side is a Elasticsearch cluster, right? It's just using the feature XDCR in order to transfer data from one cluster, one bucket, to another one. And our transport plugin on the other side is doing the rest. Okay, so what I have here as well is a dashboard, right? And as you can see, the smiley is not really looking happy because there is no data yet, right? So let's fill it with some data, and for this purpose, I just created a little demo application, which is just loading data from my Twitter account into this Twitter bucket. Okay, fine. So, should have worked. Let's go to the Couchbase console again. Let's go to the Twitter feeds here, documents. And here you see some, Twitter tweets, right? It's really simple documents. They have basically a message, length, the user, and so on, right? Okay. In the next step, we want to look at the index again, and what we can see now is that there are some Couchbase documents, right? So we can see that our documents from within our Couchbase bucket were automatically indexed on side of Elasticsearch, full text index, because we have this XDCR link between the source cluster and the Elasticsearch target cluster, which has installed our transport plugin. Okay, so let's go back to this dashboard. And hey, in this case, this dashboard is just showing the count or the amount of Couchbase in my Twitter messages. Yeah, so it counts the usage of those tags Couchbase, and it was really just an effort of 5 minutes to create this dashboard, right? So, but back to this real-time stuff. Let's create a Twitter message. Okay, let's say currently presenting about Couchbase and Elastic. Tweet. So what we can see here is that I use this hashtag Couchbase. And normally you could have run something like a continuous ETL or whatever in the background. I will just run this again here. Which means that my Twitter messages should be synchronized to my bucket. And actually, let's move this for a moment here because the button is not visible. But what I need is I need the link to my tweet. So And you can see here, this is the tweet identifier, basically, right? So I'm taking this one, going back to my Couchbase bucket, and I can now look up my tweet by using this document ID. And hey, here it is, right? So currently presenting about Couchbase and Elastic. Fine. And the next step is just to refresh my dashboard again. And as we can see, or I hope you can see, the number of usages of the tag Couchbase is increased by 1. Okay, that's it regarding the demo. The message here is that you can really perform real-time business intelligence stuff. It was indeed a real simple example, but I'm pretty sure you're getting behind it. Okay, how is it working? So, as already mentioned, the reference architecture is looking like this. So we have an XDCR link from our Couchbase cluster. Our XDCR is working per bucket to our Elasticsearch cluster. Couchbase, the source cluster, is even not aware of that. On the other side, Elasticsearch is listening because there's a transport plugin which is talking Couchbase-ish, let's say. And finally, usually your application would use both. It would work directly with Couchbase for key accesses. It will store the data within Couchbase. And if you have some specific full text search use cases within your application, it will then use Elasticsearch directly. So XDCR is something which is happening continuously, which means as soon as you have set up this link from the source cluster to the target cluster, it's even possible to do it bidirectional between Couchbase clusters. But in case of Elasticsearch, it's unidirectional because we just want to have it indexed there. It is happening continuously, right? So the data is continuously replicated over. It's topology aware, which means that if you have a multi-node Elasticsearch cluster, the source is knowing about this, right? And can handle this. And it's able to recover from network failures, right? Which means if your connection, your XDCR connection is interrupted, it's using those checkpoint documents in order to determine which data was lastly transferred, and in order to keep up then regarding the changes. So what do you need to install it? Basically, you just need to install the plugin to Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch is really cool. It's pluggable. There are tons of plugins available on the Elasticsearch website. And one of those plugins is our Couchbase adapter, right? Currently in version 2.0. And our Couchbase adapter is basically a REST service, which is listening on port 1991. And what's maybe important if you set it up, because it's using REST, you have to say when you set up the connection that it should use the XDCR protocol version 1. Okay. Let's skip this because we already saw it. So in Elasticsearch, as mentioned before, we have two kinds of documents. Or we have those Couchbase checkpoint documents and we have Couchbase documents, right? So every real document which you have in Couchbase will end up with the type Couchbase document in your Elasticsearch index. The checkpoints are just there in order to find out what you did or latest replicate, or if you have an interruption of the connection and stuff like this. And what you can do is, quite easily, is you can override our default mapping. So what happens is, you send over a document, and the document is then already processed by Elasticsearch for indexing purposes. And how this document is processed depends on the mapping which is specified. So you can say something like, a Couchbase document has a specific attribute, which is, for instance, a geo attribute, and can then use even Elasticsearch for geo-indexing purposes. There is another talk after this one, right over there, where we will talk about geo-indexes in Couchbase. But just as an example that you can specify how you would like to index this property. And actually, I don't want to go into detail here. It's just that you know that we have a default mapping, and if you're not happy with it and you want to have a more specific mapping, you can override it. Okay, something which is cool and new in the 2.0 version is the Couchbase type selector, right? So which means that you can, in a way, specify which keys should be mapped to which document type. As mentioned before, per default, it's Couchbase document, but sometimes you would like to map, or you would like to have user objects indexed as users and not as Couchbase documents, for instance, right? In this case, based on these key patterns, for instance, and we have a type selector which is working on regular expressions, but you can indeed write your own type selectors, yeah. Those are working on the key, right? So key patterns are relevant here. You can then decide to map to other types. And finally, some more advanced settings, let's say. So you can override which port you want to listen on side of Elasticsearch, what the Couchbase username password is, number of V buckets. So as you know, Couchbase is distributed, so each node has a number of partitions, and Elasticsearch is mimicking this. So our Elasticsearch plugin is mimicking this. So you may want to override this. I think it's only relevant for performance purposes and in parallel working on V buckets. But yeah, then the default document type, which is Couchbase document, right? The checkpoint document type, which is Couchbase checkpoint, or then you may want to ignore deletes. So if a delete is happening in Couchbase, then you can just ignore that this delete is happening, right? Not reflected in the Elasticsearch index. Can we move the questions to the end? Because we have a tight time frame. So, okay, and rep counters is something which is also interesting. In Couchbase, we have counter documents. You may know this, right? Which means we can increment documents based on or a value based on a key. And this counter is, let's say, a flat value. So it's a number. It's not wrapped by a JSON document. And for this reason, it's not automatically indexed on side of Elasticsearch, which means if you want to wrap those counters by JSON in order to get it indexed on side of Elasticsearch, you can use this setting. Okay, just a few sentences about what's new, right? We already saw type selectors, right? So we can support now more than one document type. This was quite often requested regarding the older version of the plugin. We can filter documents before we send them over to Elasticsearch for indexing purposes. We can ignore these deletes. We can ignore Elasticsearch errors. Sometimes you would like to ignore that a specific data type could not be indexed or something like that. So basically skip this document. And in this case, we built some into the Elasticsearch plugin to ignore Elasticsearch errors. This counter wrapping and and bug fixes, basically, right? Okay, so we are now open for questions. You had one, yeah?
So the configuration on the Couchbase side, you put in a single URL. If you have a 9-node cluster, are all of the indexing requests going to go to that single node?
You mean in the XDCR configuration? It's actually a good question. XDCR is cluster aware, which means there happens a kind of bootstrapping in XDCR, which means the initial node is just a node who is providing you information about the cluster on the other side, right? So what happens is you establish a connection to the initial node, and the initial node gives you usually something which we call cluster map, and this cluster map contains the information which other nodes are part of the cluster. And if you use XDCR, this configuration is persisted. So even if the original node would go down, or even the source node would go down, if you bring it up again, you still have this cluster map, and you're able to get the information from another node then.
But it thinks of it as a Couchbase cluster?
It thinks it is a Couchbase cluster, so the plugin is doing the magic here. The plugin is giving the Couchbase source cluster this map, right? So, and the plugin needs to be installed on every node of the Elasticsearch cluster.
Does the map include the master nodes?
We don't have strictly something like a master, right? In
No,
the,
Elasticsearch does.
yeah, good question actually. Or I think that the map is just including the master node, right? But I can double check for you if you want.
With 4.0, with nickel support coming in,
Yeah.
how that integration will work? Because now both supports aggregation and
Yeah, let's say it this way. As mentioned before, as explained before, there is a difference between a secondary index, right, and a full text search index, right? Even if you have nickel and you can do like queries, this is not the same as a full text search index. This is basically a secondary index by applying a pattern on something which you retrieve by asking the secondary index, whereby Elasticsearch is maintaining an inverted index, right? So it's still another use case, right? So in Elasticsearch, you can easily search for a specific token, right? So you can search for a specific word without any context. You can just say Fox, and every sentence which is containing the word Fox is matching this query. In Couchbase, with a like query, you would have to do something like, placeholder, Fox placeholder by matching on a specific string. So these are complete separated use cases. Yeah. Any other questions?
How about security between on the XDCR level? So I believe there's a transport security, right, XDCR that all the data gets encrypted. Would it support that?
Per default, it's not encrypted, right? Per default, it's just HTTP, right? But Couchbase Enterprise has at least encrypted XDCR via HTTPS, right? So yeah, I'm not sure, really not. But I will find out for you. So if you come to me afterwards, I will make sure that you get the information.
Yeah, so I'll just add a few things there, right? So, yeah, we've been talking to the Couchbase team, especially on the plugin side. How do you kind of interact with Elasticsearch clusters which have shield enabled, right? So, what does that mean? Will the plugin need to kind of like make some changes to make sure it kind of it kind of aligns with the shield rules which are deployed on the Elasticsearch cluster? So that is not there in that support is not there in the plugin today. But that's what we're kind of working on in the next release or next few releases of the transport plugin.
Yes?
I'm not very familiar with Elasticsearch, but currently we are using Cassandra. Basically, they have that enterprise. They have Solar integration. For the integrating with
Yeah.
so in that case, we don't have to pay additional license fee, and also our apps doesn't have to take care of other clusters, totally different from this one, right?
You mean they have Solar integration by default without any additional licensing?
Yes.
Yeah, would be interesting what happens if you really have a Solar issue and you open a support ticket. I don't know.
So, yeah, we actually have one issue before. They are quite right responsive to those. So they do have some committer of Solar, so they know Solar
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, because from business decision, if their license fee is lower and the performance is great and the apps overhead is lower, how is this setup going to compete with that?
So from a point of view of Couchbase first, right? I mean, we are definitely experts regarding Couchbase server, Couchbase mobile, so we are focusing on operational database systems here and not explicitly on full text search engines. And Elastic, they are experts for full text search, right? So yeah, I would say this is a good thing that you have two separated experts regarding this. Yeah, this is the first statement, and yeah, do we have another answer as well?
Elasticsearch, hello. Yeah, so Elasticsearch and Solar, it's often compared, and there's a lot of material out there which will kind of give you the point of view. Clearly, I'm biased. I work for Elastic, so we feel like Elasticsearch has been built ground up to kind of do the distributed search. So Solar added like that support in Solar 4 Cloud, which is more of the recent edition. And from what I understand, like the Cassandra guys or the DataStax guys do is like run Solar on top of Cassandra, basically. So Elasticsearch is purpose built, like you sort of like deploy it on like bare metal or virtualized environment, but it's from an operational perspective, you couldn't find anything easier than Elasticsearch. It's so easy to get started. You just deploy it, and you can start with one node, and adding nodes is like really easy. You just add another node with the Elasticsearch instance and just point it to the same cluster name. It kind of joins, basically. So there are a lot of benefits in terms of how the Elasticsearch architecture is built and how it sort of scales, and from an operations perspective.
Yeah. Another thing maybe that the reason for this tight integration with Solar is maybe also some other reasons related to the own query engine and stuff like that, right? So they are actually sometimes not using it really for full text search indexing, but for querying in general, right? But we have Nickel for querying in general quite soon in 4.0, right? Yeah.
So happy to stick around and take more questions. Just so we have to wrap up. But
Yeah.
thank